Um, Imagine you are standing on a beach,
Okay, I'm picturing it.
right? And you are holding this tiny, really cheap plastic bucket, like a little kid's beach toy.
Yeah, got it.
And someone walks right up to you, hands you a clipboard, points out at the horizon, and just says, all right, I need you to memorize the ocean.
Oh, wow. The whole
The
ocean.
entire thing. Every single drop of water, every shifting current, every bizarre little fish hiding way down at the bottom. And just say, go.
I mean, that is a spectacularly overwhelming image. I would probably just drop the bucket and walk away.
Right. Exactly. And honestly, that is universally the visceral feeling of trying to learn a new language as an adult, especially English.
Oh, absolutely. It really is.
Because you are suddenly staring at this infinite churning sea of irregular verbs and phrasal combinations that completely defy basic logic. Not to mention the slang that seems to rewrite itself every single time you open social media.
Great. The sheer volume of it creates this instant paralysis.
Exactly. So we wade in about ankle deep, right? We get hit by a massive wave of conditional grammar rules, and then we just retreat straight back to the shoreline.
And the sad part is, we usually treat that retreat as a personal moral failure.
Oh,
We tell ourselves, we just don't have the discipline, or we lack the magical language learning gene.
well, welcome to our class today. I am Eric, an English teacher, and I am so glad you're joining us.
And I am Jane, also an English teacher. It is so great to have you all here listening.
Today, we are exploring the underlying mechanics of that exact failure we just talked about.
No.
And, more importantly, how to reverse engineer it.
Yes, it is such an important topic.
We are working with some truly brilliant excerpts from a guide called The Sustained Path to English Fluency. And our mission today is to completely dismantle the psychology of language learning.
I love that. Dismantling it.
Yeah, we want to figure out how to stop treating our motivation like some, mystical spark that you either wake up with or you don't. We need to start treating it as a highly mechanical structure, something you can actively build, protect, and repair.
Right, because the overarching premise we are exploring from the source material is that motivation is not a personality trait.
Okay, wait, say more about that.
Well, it's an engineered system. Culturally, we have this deeply ingrained kind of fatalistic idea about willpower.
Like you either have it or you're just lazy.
Exactly. We treat it as a fixed, depletable resource, kind of like the battery on your smartphone, right?
That's a good way to put it.
But when you actually look at the cognitive science of learning, you see that motivation is something you manage. You manage it through deliberate architectural choices in your daily life.
Which sounds amazing, but how do we actually do that?
Well, to do that, you first have to anchor your effort to something highly, highly tangible.
So let's pull that apart, because right out of the gate, we run into a concept in the book that feels incredibly counterintuitive.
Right.
Especially in our modern hustle culture, We're constantly told to set massive, audacious goals, like shoot for the moon.
The whole dream big mentality.
Exactly. But our material today argues that setting a generic, massive goal, specifically something like, I want to be fluent in English,
Yeah.
is arguably the #1 reason people end up quitting.
Yeah, and the neuroscience of how human beings process rewards explains exactly why that generic ambition fails so predictably.
Because it's too big.
Well, yes. When you say, I want to be fluent, you are aiming at a moving, subjective target.
Okay, I see.
Your brain operates on a dopamine reward system. And dopamine isn't just about pleasure, It's literally a molecule of anticipation and motivation.
Right, it's what gets you off the couch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it requires a clear, recognizable finish line to release that drive. So fluency is just an abstract concept. It doesn't trigger that reward prediction circuitry at all.
I was actually reading a study recently on how dopamine signaling works with long-term projects. And it turns out our brains will actively punish us with feelings of exhaustion when the goal is perceived as too distant or just too abstract.
Yes. The brain just says no.
Right. The effort-to-reward ratio becomes mathematically impossible for the brain to justify.
Exactly.
So when you hit a difficult Tuesday night,
Right.
You're exhausted from work, and you sit down and try to untangle past perfect tense.
Ugh, the worst.
Right. The abstract idea of fluency offers absolutely zero neurological payoff in that moment.
None at all, which is why you need an emotional tether.
An emotional tether, I like that.
Yeah, to survive that really difficult Tuesday, The goal has to be intensely, vividly personal.
Like what? Give me an example for our learners.
Well, it is the difference between saying, I want to master the English language, and saying, I want to watch the season finale of my favorite British crime drama without looking at the subtitles even once.
Oh, wow. That is specific.
Right. Or saying, I want to walk into that specific tech company in London, sit down for an interview, and confidently explain my portfolio.
You can physically feel the difference in those goals.
You really can.
Like you can actually visualize the interview room. You can imagine the exact couch you'll be sitting on while you're watching that crime drama.
And that visualization is the secret. When you can vividly imagine the emotional payoff, your brain can simulate the dopamine release in the present moment.
Oh, so you trick your brain into feeling the reward now.
Exactly. That simulated reward is the actual biological tether. That is what pulls you back to your desk when your natural willpower just totally dips.
Okay, so we established this highly vivid, personal why. That's our final destination.
Right.
But having a destination doesn't automatically get you across the ocean. We still have to deal with the daily reality of the water,
Yes, the day-to-day grind.
which shifts our focus to the physical mechanics of the journey. Specifically, the text talks about the strategy of shrinking the goalposts to an almost absurd degree.
Yeah, we move from the philosophical anchor to the actual practical execution.
Because intimidation is the enemy of action.
100%. If your daily to-do list says, study English for 2 hours, the cognitive load is massive.
I would find any excuse to avoid that. I'd suddenly need to clean my entire kitchen.
We all would. But if you shrink the goalpost to something highly visible and immediately achievable like learning, exactly 5 vocabulary words related to your job.
Just 5 words.
Just 5.
Oh.
Or maybe reading a single chapter of a graded reader where the vocabulary is intentionally matched to your current beginner level, the whole dynamic changes completely.
You essentially hack the brain's need for completion.
Yes, exactly.
I know for myself, if I just have to check off one really small box, the barrier to entry is so low, I can't logically argue against doing it.
Right, you can't say you don't have time for 5 words.
Exactly. And doing it provides that micro hit of dopamine. Progress you can actually see is progress you genuinely believe in.
It really is. And in addition to shrinking the targets, the book puts a heavy emphasis on altering the actual texture of the learning itself.
The texture. What do you mean by that?
Well, motivation degrades incredibly fast when the process feels like a chore or a punishment. So the strategy is to inextricably link the language to activities you already inherently enjoy.
Okay, so tying it to fun stuff.
Exactly. If you love gaming, you switch the audio and text of your games to English. If you follow fashion or maybe woodworking, you flood your social media feeds with English-speaking creators in those specific niches.
And I have to throw a flag on the play here.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to push back on this a little bit for the sake of our learners, because this sounds like the absolute ultimate procrastination trap.
Okay, I hear you.
Right. If I am sinking 3 hours into scrolling TikToks about woodworking in English, or I'm trying to beat a boss in a video game, my skeptical brain says I am not actually studying.
You're just playing around.
Yeah. I'm just finding a highly sophisticated, guilt-free way to waste time on my phone.
Yeah.
Where is the actual grammatical rigor in that?
That skepticism is incredibly common. It stems from this deeply ingrained educational bias we all have, that true learning requires suffering.
Right, like no pain, no gain.
Exactly. We think if we aren't miserable in front of a whiteboard, it doesn't count. But linguists, particularly following Stephen Krashen's theories on second language acquisition, understand a mechanism called the affective filter.
The affective filter, basically a psychological wall, right?
Yes, but it is deeply biological. When you are stressed or bored or forcing yourself through a really rigid textbook exercise, your amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, is highly active.
It's panicking.
It is. And when the amygdala is fired up, it literally restricts the flow of information to the prefrontal cortex and the language processing centers.
So your brain actually plays defense.
Yes, it blocks the input.
Wow. Okay, so trying to cram grammar rules while you're stressed out is like trying to pour water into a sealed jar.
That is a phenomenal way to picture it, yes.
The lid is just on tight.
It's completely sealed. Conversely, when you are genuinely having fun laughing at a TikTok or really engaged in a video game, your affective filter drops completely.
The lid comes off.
The lid comes off, the amygdala calms down. You are exposing yourself to the language in its natural, chaotic ecosystem,
Right.
and your brain begins absorbing syntax, slang, and context clues subconsciously. You are processing language not as abstract math equations to be solved, but as a living tool for actual communication.
That makes a lot of sense. So the key metric isn't how much you suffered. It's whether the activity keeps you engaged enough to actually return to the language the very next day.
Exactly.
It's kind of like the difference between forcing yourself to run on a treadmill while staring at a blank basement wall versus playing a fiercely competitive game of basketball with your friend.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. You're getting the cardiovascular workout either way.
Right.
But one requires immense willpower to endure, and the other you'd gladly pay money to do.
And you will play basketball for far, far longer than you will ever run on that treadmill.
So true. Okay, so we have our emotional tether, we've shrunk our goalposts, and we are bypassing the amygdala by keeping the learning inherently fun.
A pretty solid foundation so far.
It is. But let's bring this back to earth for a second. Because eventually, no matter how fun your media diet is, you have to open your mouth and actually speak to another human being.
The scary part.
The terrifying part.
Mm.
And every single learner inevitably hits that wall where they feel utterly foolish.
Yes, they do.
So we really need to look at how we process the concept of failure.
Right. And interpreting that wall correctly is really the dividing line between those who eventually achieve fluency and those who abandon the project entirely.
So how do we interpret it correctly?
The first step in redefining failure is realizing you cannot trust your own subjective feelings of progress.
Because we are too hard on ourselves.
Exactly. You will inevitably feel like you are stagnating simply because your brain hasn't reached native level perfection yet. So you need objective data to combat that subjective pessimism.
Objective data, meaning tracking mechanisms, right?
Yep.
Like keeping a running vocabulary journal or maintaining a streak on a language app where you can visualize your daily habit.
That's it. The intention is to compare today's baseline to your baseline from, say, 3 months ago.
Oh, I see.
When you look back at a journal entry from January and you can immediately spot 5 glaring grammatical errors you made back then,
Yeah.
that isn't a sign of failure.
It's actually a win.
It's a huge win. That is the concrete, irrefutable proof of your cognitive evolution. You have leveled up enough to recognize your past mistakes.
Okay, that makes perfect logical sense on paper. You reframe mistakes as data.
Right.
But let's talk about the physical reality of conversation, because it's messy.
It is very messy.
I vividly remember being in this small cafe abroad, right?
Mhm.
And I was trying to order soup, just soup. I practiced the sentence in my head for like 10 minutes. The waiter walks over, I open my mouth, and in a moment of pure panic, I confidently order a bar of soap.
Oh, no. Soap.
Soap. And the waiter just stares at me. My palms are sweating. My heart is pounding so loud in my ears, I literally wanted to sink into the floorboards.
I have been there. We have all been there.
In that moment of visceral biological panic, a vocabulary journal feels pretty useless.
Sure.
So how does reframing mistakes as data actually stop that horrible fight or flight response?
The truth is, it doesn't stop the initial spike of adrenaline.
It doesn't.
No, you can't stop that. That physical reaction is an evolutionary response to feeling socially vulnerable. Your brain is trying to protect you from tribal rejection.
Like getting kicked out of the village.
Exactly. But what the objective tracking does, your journal, your app streak it, provides a foundational floor of logical confidence beneath that emotional panic.
A safety net.
Right. When the adrenaline spikes and you say soap instead of soup, the underlying knowledge that you are mathematically improving prevents that single awkward moment from spiraling into total defeat.
I see. So it acts as an emotional shock absorber.
Yes, beautifully put.
Like, I might have messed up this specific interaction, but I have the receipts to prove I'm better than I was in January.
Furthermore, we vastly overestimate how harshly we are actually being judged.
Oh, for sure.
Think about it. When a non-native speaker approaches you and attempts to speak English, but they use the wrong preposition or mispronounce a noun, do you view them as intellectually deficient?
Never. Honestly, I am usually just incredibly grateful they are making the effort to cross the bridge into my language.
The vast majority of native speakers feel the exact same way. They are listening for intent and connection, not grading your syntax.
That's a huge relief.
And every single time you stumble through an awkward sentence, you are extracting live ecological feedback that a textbook could never provide.
Right, like real-world data.
Exactly. You learn the real-world rhythm of a pause. You learn how native speakers use filler words. A mistake in a cafe isn't a failure. It is the environment communicating with you.
That is such a crucial pivot in mindset, but it leads directly into the biggest hurdle, I think.
What's that?
Well, reframing an embarrassing cafe moment might save your motivation for a week.
Hmm.
But what sustains this whole brain hack over the 2, 3, or 4 years, it actually takes to wire a new language into your neural pathways.
Yeah, that's the real challenge.
Because adrenaline and novelty, they wear off pretty fast.
They do. And this brings us to the structural architecture of longevity.
Okay, let's get into the structure.
Motivation is an unreliable friend. You simply cannot rely on it for a multi-year project. You have to rely on systems, primarily the system of relentless routine.
Right. And the text makes a really fascinating argument about the danger of the sprint mentality.
Oh, the sprint is so dangerous.
It actively discourages the 3-hour weekend cram session, right?
Yeah.
In favor of just 15 focused minutes every single day.
Yes. The 3-hour cram session is a trap. It's built by our desire for immediate gratification.
Because it feels tremendously productive in the moment.
It does. You close the books feeling exhausted but accomplished, but neurologically, you have completely overwhelmed your working memory.
It's just too much at once.
Exactly. The brain can only consolidate a limited amount of novel information at one time.
And the hangover from that cognitive overload is intense. I know the next day, the mere thought of looking at an English textbook makes me feel slightly nauseous.
Because you have accidentally trained your brain to associate the language with exhaustion and cognitive pain.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it like that.
But the 15-minute daily habit, that operates on a completely different frequency. It utilizes spaced repetition.
So little bits spaced out over time.
Right. By touching the language for a short, highly focused burst every single day, you signal to your brain that this information is vital for daily survival.
And that tells the brain to keep it.
Yes. It prompts it to build stronger neural pathways while you sleep.
The analogy I always come back to for this is brushing your teeth.
Oh, perfect.
Right. You don't wait until Sunday and brush your teeth for 3 hours straight to make up for the whole week.
That would be horrible.
It would be awful. You just do it for 2 minutes every morning and every night.
Yeah.
And it is entirely devoid of emotion.
Yes.
It's not exciting. It's just a non-negotiable hygiene habit.
And that lack of emotion is exactly what you want for a daily study habit. You completely remove the decision fatigue. You don't ask, do I feel like studying today? You just do your 15 minutes.
Let me challenge that for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Because there is a uniquely frustrating phenomenon that happens even when you have perfect study hygiene.
The plateau.
The dreaded plateau.
Mhm.
You're showing up for your 15 minutes a day. You are reading your graded readers. But for months, you feel like you haven't improved at all.
It's so discouraging.
It is. If I brush my teeth every day, but my teeth don't look any cleaner, eventually I'm going to snap the toothbrush in half.
Fair point.
So how do you trust a process when the progress is completely invisible?
The plateau is arguably the most dangerous phase of language acquisition because it breaks our expectation of linear growth.
We just expect effort to equal immediate visible results.
Exactly. We want a straight upward line. But human neuroplasticity does not work in a straight upward trajectory. It works in stair steps.
Think of it like a smartphone downloading a massive background operating system update.
Yes.
Right? You're staring at your screen, you're tapping the apps, and everything feels super sluggish. The user interface looks completely frozen. You literally think the phone is broken.
But beneath the screen, the system is entirely rewiring itself. Millions of lines of code are being reorganized so that tomorrow the phone runs twice as fast.
So that's what's happening in our brains.
Exactly. During a language plateau, your brain is doing the exact same thing. It is taking all the passive vocabulary you've been stuffing into it and doing the incredibly complex back-end work of connecting it to your active speech centers.
It's organizing the files.
Right. It is solidifying grammatical structures that previously required conscious effort, and it's moving them into your subconscious reflexes.
So the progress is actually happening.
It is happening rapidly. It is just occurring below your conscious awareness.
Which is logically reassuring, but emotionally agonizing to live through.
It is absolute agony, and that emotional agony is precisely why the final pillar of this longevity architecture is community.
You cannot survive the background update alone.
No, you can't.
We're talking about things like language exchange partners, digital communities, or local speaking groups, right?
Exactly. Humans are biologically wired to regulate our emotions through social connection.
There's actually a concept called social baseline theory. Have you heard of it?
I have, but explain it for our learners.
So it shows that when humans face a difficult physical task like walking up a steep hill, they actually perceive the hill as less steep if they are standing next to a friend.
Wow. Literally, physically less steep.
Yes. And the same applies to cognitive mountains. When your progress feels invisible and your internal motivation is completely zeroed out, the shared struggle of a community acts as an external battery.
I love that. An external battery.
Yeah.
You log on to your language exchange, you are totally ready to quit, and your partner says, I have been staring at this exact same English phrasal verb for 3 weeks and I still don't get it.
And suddenly, you aren't failing.
Right. You are just experiencing a completely normal stage of the ecosystem. They normalize the plateau for you.
You borrow their momentum to get through your 15 minutes that day, and then maybe they borrow yours the next week.
Exactly. You externalize the burden of willpower. It becomes a collective effort to keep showing up until the plateau finally breaks, and you hit that next level of fluency.
This is so powerful. Let's pull the lens all the way back and look at the blueprint we've just mapped out for everyone today.
Okay, let's summarize.
The defining takeaway here is completely abandoning the myth of the magic spark.
Hmm.
Motivation is not something that just happens to you. It is a machine that you construct.
You build it intentionally, knowing full well that your brain is always going to try to take the path of least resistance at every opportunity.
Exactly. You anchor the machine with a vivid, highly personal emotional tether.
Right.
Then you shrink the daily goalposts down to microtasks so the brain constantly receives the dopamine of completion.
Check those tiny boxes.
You bypass the threat response of the amygdala by filtering the language through hobbies and media you already inherently love.
Keep the effective filter low. Keep it fun.
Yes. You use objective tracking to shield yourself from the inevitable panic of real-world mistakes, viewing those missteps as valuable ecological data.
Soap instead of soup. It's just data.
Just data.
Right.
And finally, you protect the entire system against long-term burnout through relentless, emotionless, 15-minute daily routines and a community that holds you steady during those invisible plateaus.
It is a remarkably elegant way to take a task that feels like swallowing an ocean and turn it into a manageable daily glass of water.
It really transforms the impossible into a series of highly inevitable steps.
It really does.
Well, as we wrap up our session today, I want to leave you, our listener, with a broader thought to chew on.
Oh, I love a good final thought.
We have spent this time meticulously unpacking how this architecture applies to learning English. But as we discussed these mechanisms, the emotional tethers, lowering the effective filter through play, reframing visceral failure as data, and relying on community to endure those invisible background updates, I keep wondering about the collateral applications of this framework.
In other areas of life.
Exactly. Could we overlay this exact same sustained path onto the other massive, intimidating oceans in our lives?
That's a great question.
What if the secret to pivoting to a highly complex new career in your 40s, or finally learning to code, or even navigating the incredibly messy, overwhelming early stages of a complex new relationship? What if it isn't about raw, innate talent or having a superhuman reservoir of willpower?
Right. What if it's just mechanics?
What if success in almost any daunting human endeavor is simply a matter of how cleverly you manage your own neurological motivation?
That changes everything.
It does. The next time you find yourself standing on a metaphorical beach, holding a plastic bucket, and feeling utterly paralyzed by the sheer volume of what is in front of you, well, maybe the answer isn't to brace yourself and try to scoop up the entire sea.
Just put the bucket down.
Right. Maybe the answer is to just find one specific, tiny current that you genuinely enjoy swimming in, jump in for 15 minutes, and trust the process of the water.
I think that is a perfect place to leave it today.
Thanks for joining our class today. Keep practicing, keep making those mistakes, and we'll catch you next time.